Under the previous order, all post-cloture time has expired. The question occurs on the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson of the District of Columbia to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There is, and certainly appears to be, a sufficient second. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin. Aye. Ms. Baldwin, aye. Mr. Barrasso. No. Mr. Barrasso, no. Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Bennett, aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn, no. Mr. Blumenthal. Aye. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Blunt. No. Mr. Blunt, no. Mr. Booker. Yes. Mr. Booker, aye. Mr. Bozeman. No. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Braun. Mr. Braun, no. Mr. Brown. Aye. Mr. Brown, aye. Mr. Burr. No. Mr. Burr, no. Ms. Cantwell. Aye. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Mrs. Capito. Mrs. Capito, no. Mr. Cardin. Aye. Mr. Cardin, aye. Mr. Carper. Aye. Mr. Carper, aye. Mr. Casey. Aye. Mr. Casey, aye. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy, no. Ms. Collins. Aye. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Coons. Aye. Mr. Coons, aye. Mr. Cornyn. No. Mr. Cornyn, no. Ms. Cortez Masto. Aye. Ms. Cortez Masto, aye. Mr. Cotton. No. Mr. Cotton, no. Mr. Kramer. No. Mr. Kramer, no. Mr. Crapo. No. Mr. Crapo, no. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, no. Mr. Daines? No. Mr. Daines, no. Ms. Duckworth? Aye. Ms. Duckworth, aye. Mr. Durbin? Aye. Mr. Durbin, aye. Ms. Ernst? No. Ms. Ernst, no. Mrs. Feinstein? Aye. Mrs. Feinstein, aye. Mrs. Fisher? No. Mrs. Fisher, no. Mrs. Gillibrand? Aye. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Mr. Graham? Mr. Grassley? Mr. Grassley, no. Mr. Haggerty? No. Mr. Haggerty, no. Ms. Hassan? Aye. Ms. Hassan, aye. Mr. Hawley? No. Mr. Hawley, no. Mr. Heinrich? Aye. Mr. Heinrich, aye. Mr. Hickenlooper? Aye. Mr. Hickenlooper, aye. Ms. Hirono? Ms. Hirono, aye. Mr. Hoven? No. Mr. Hoven, no. Mrs. Hyde-Smith? No. Mrs. Hyde-Smith, no. Mr. Inhofe? Mr. Inhofe, no. Mr. Johnson? No. Mr. Johnson, no. Mr. Kane? Aye. Mr. Kane, aye. Mr. Kelly? Aye. Mr. Kelly, aye. Mr. Kennedy? No. Mr. Kennedy, no. Mr. King? Aye. Mr. King, aye. Ms. Klobuchar? Aye. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Langford? Mr. Langford, no. Mr. Leahy? Aye. Mr. Leahy, aye. Mr. Lee? Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Lujan? Aye. Mr. Lujan, aye. Ms. Lummis? Ms. Lummis, no. Mr. Manchin? Aye. Mr. Manchin, aye. Mr. Markey? Aye. Mr. Markey, aye. Mr. Marshall? No. Mr. Marshall, no. Mr. McConnell? No. Mr. McConnell, no. Mr. Menendez? Aye. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mr. Merkley? Aye. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Moran? Mr. Moran voted in the negative. Ms. Murkowski? Aye. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mr. Murphy? Mr. Murphy, aye. Mrs. Murray? Mrs. Murray, aye. Mr. Ossoff? Mr. Ossoff, aye. Mr. Padilla? Aye. Mr. Padilla, aye. Mr. Paul? Mr. Peters? Aye. Mr. Peters, aye. Mr. Portman? Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed, aye. Mr. Risch? Mr. Risch, no. Mr. Romney? Mr. Romney, aye. Ms. Rosen? Ms. Rosen, aye. Mr. Rounds? Mr. Rounds, no. Mr. Rubio? Mr. Rubio, no. Mr. Sanders? Mr. Sanders, aye. Mr. Sass? Mr. Sass, no. Mr. Schatz? Mr. Schatz, aye. Mr. Schumer? Mr. Schumer, aye. Mr. Scott of Florida? Mr. Scott of Florida, no. Mr. Scott of South Carolina? Mr. Scott of South Carolina, no. Mrs. Shaheen? Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Shelby? Mr. Shelby, no. Ms. Sinema? Ms. Sinema, aye. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith, aye. Ms. Stabenow? Ms. Stabenow, aye. Mr. Sullivan? Mr. Sullivan, no. Mr. Tester? Mr. Tester, aye. Mr. Thune? Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Tillis? Mr. Tillis, no. Mr. Toomey? Mr. Toomey, no. Mr. Tuberville? Mr. Tuberville, no. Mr. Van Hollen? Mr. Van Hollen, aye. Mr. Warner? Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Warnock? Mr. Warnock, aye. Ms. Warren? Ms. Warren, aye. Mr. Whitehouse? Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Mr. Wicker? Mr. Wicker, no. Mr. Wyden? Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Young? Mr. Young, no. Mr. Graham? Mr. Graham, no.
We are watching this historic vote take place live on the Senate floor. It is anticipated to be a bipartisan vote with senators from Maine, Alaska, and Utah previously announcing their support for this history-making confirmation, saying Ketanji Brown Jackson is well qualified for this position. So we are going to be listening in to this vote in its entirety right here for our viewers with us on Live Now from Fox. At this time, we do know she has 53 yays. That means this confirmation vote has officially not ended yet, but will be confirming what we know here today is a historic moment, confirming the first Black woman on the high court. It is definitely going to be a day that she will forever remember, and so will many of our future historians remember this day here today as well. You can see just some of those hugs and celebrations happening with some of the senators there down on the floor. Again, this is a live picture of the Senate floor during this vote. We've been listening in to all of the senators voice their opinion here, and of course we're going to be staying on top of this breaking news right here for you on Live Now from Fox. Also want to let our viewers know, coming up, we do anticipate a White House press briefing. It was scheduled a little earlier here today. Looks like they may have wanted this confirmation vote to be finalized before stepping out and giving a press briefing. So we are expecting that a little bit later here today. Want to also show our viewers that we do have a number of people who are watching this live, not only with us here on Live Now from Fox, but here's a live look at some students, young people watching history being made. These are some students at Howard Law School. We'll be keeping an eye on their reaction here as this vote is taking place on the Senate floor. So once again, at this moment, we have a brief pause happening here on the Senate floor right now. Ketanji Brown Jackson, confirmation vote still open. She has received 53 votes, 53 yays, that is. The votes are being confirmed, and then it will become official. The vote not yet closed, as they are getting all of these final confirmations ahead of the announcement. Again, this is a very historic moment for a lot of people who are watching here with us on Live Now from Fox. The very first Black woman who will be sat on the high court. Back when the Judiciary Committee was debating her nomination, there was a lot of Republicans who were speaking out, opposing Ketanji Brown Jackson on several different areas. A lot of them saying she was going soft on crime when it came to her sentencing record. A lot of our senators focused specifically on sentencing for child pornography offenders. Senator Ted Cruz, one of those very vocal senators who had put his opinions out there in front of her face, is saying based on her record, I believe she will prove to be the furthest left of any justice to have ever served on the Supreme Court. This is what he had said on Thursday. Now, today's vote, again, has been a roller coaster leading up to this moment, but now here we are hearing that all of those votes are in. They are being confirmed, knowing that she did receive 53 votes of yays, which means as soon as the vote is closed, she will be officially confirmed on the Supreme Court. Just a reminder, she's going to be taking place for Justice Breyer. He was the one who had announced his retirement earlier here this year. A lot of folks remembered President Biden had announced during his candidacy for president that he was promising to appoint the first Black woman on Supreme Court, and now today that promise is going to be fulfilled. Let him know. So once again, we are live here on the Senate floor. Taking place is the vote for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to be sat on the Supreme Court. This is going to be a historic moment once everything is confirmed. We are standing by, waiting for that final confirmation. The vote's still not closed quite yet at this time. But I do want to bring in here one of our experts, especially as a lot of people have been watching for this moment to happen here. He is one of our experts we've been talking with throughout this entire process. And so let's just go ahead and begin here. Carlos Moore joining us here on Live Now from Fox. He's the president of the National Bar Association. And Carlos, I know that some people want to wait until that final verdict is read out, but this is really a big moment. Talk about what this really truly means for everyone who's been watching here today.
Yes, Krista, this moment is monumental for so many people, especially Black women and also Black men, boys and girls across this nation. This is a day that will be forever etched in our memories. I mean, 54 years and 3 days after Dr. King was tragically assassinated on April the 4th of 1968, 54 years later, we now have his dream realized, where a Black woman was judged by the content of her character, and her color did not keep her away from the Supreme Court. So we are pleased that she has received 53 votes out of the 100 votes in the Senate, and that she will be the next U.S. Supreme Court Justice, the first Black woman ever. So we could not be more pleased.
And when people are thinking about her career, what's led her here to this moment, talk about just some of her history and what really has made her qualified for this position. Because you think about being sat on the high court, and of course, you have to have a really big resume to be confirmed into the Supreme Court.
Yes, the National Bar Association believes Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is one of the most qualified nominees in history. In the 233 years that the Supreme Court has been around, there's never been a Black woman, and she'll be the 116th justice. And so she has lived the American dream. She's the epitome of the American dream. Born to two parents who were graduates of historically Black colleges and universities in this country. Her father was a teacher, her mother was a teacher. Her father eventually went to law school and became an attorney. And in spite of her becoming an attorney, she went to Harvard undergrad and also Harvard Law School, was on the law review, and has done very well. Has had a storied legal career. She was an assistant federal public defender before becoming engaged in the judiciary. She's been a trial judge on the federal level as well as an appellate court judge. And so she also clerked for the person she's replacing, Justice Breyer. So we are just excited and elated that she has been given the nod and finally confirmed by the Senate.
Right, and I know you can see too on the Senate floor a lot of those Democrats, especially, even though it was bipartisan. We know that she got 53 yays, and again, they're confirming all of the votes at this time. But bipartisan, how important is that they did have some of those Republican senators vote yay and confirm her to the Supreme Court?
That was very, very important, because this country is severely divided, and the Supreme Court is supposed to be apolitical, it's supposed to be above politics. And so I'm glad that someone that has now a lifetime appointment to the bench got bipartisan support. I wish it had been greater, but we are happy about the 3 Republicans that did vote in favor of Ketanji Brown Jackson. I was disappointed that the senator from South Carolina, the only Black man as a Republican in the Senate, voted against her. I thought that that was a sad statement on his part, because she's highly qualified. So I don't know why Tim Scott would not.
You know, and I think a big thing that I want to point out as well is, you know, obviously with her replacing Justice Breyer, that's not going to shake up anything on the Supreme Court. What are your thoughts on kind of that balance when it comes to them taking on some bigger issues this summer once she officially does join the Supreme Court?
Yeah, immediately her confirmation and being placed on the bench is not going to shake up everything. It's going to still be a 6-3 court, 6 conservatives and 3 liberals. But she has a lifetime appointment. She's only 51 years of age. At some point, the tide will turn, and I believe she will be in the majority. And her opinions right now may be dissents for the most part, but at some point, her dissents may be majority opinion in the future. So we're excited that she writes very, very verbose and well written statements and opinions, and we just know that she's going to contribute to the very fabric of America for years and decades to come.
And I showed previously, I know you were watching here with us, we do have a picture here of some students who are watching. This is students at Howard Law School. They're going to be reacting live. I mean, they obviously have heard, you know, that she does have the 53 yay votes, but of course we always like that final stamp of approval. What do you think they're thinking during this moment as they're watching history unfold live in front of them?
Yeah, I'm sitting here watching them. It looks like there are 3 black ladies and 2 black men that are law students in this footage I'm watching. And for the young ladies especially, they now know that they can become Supreme Court justices. The black men have known since Thurgood Marshall. We've had Thurgood Marshall as well as Clarence Thomas. But for the black woman who has the burden of a double minority, it has not been the case until today. And so I'm just very elated for those young ladies pictured there. I'm also elated for my daughter. I have an 11-year-old daughter who now knows that she can rise to the highest heights in this country. I mean, vice president, member of the Supreme Court. I mean, the sky is the limit, and I could not be more grateful.
Yeah, I mean, you think about that, just kind of these strides that we've been taking, not only in the past decade, but even here in these past few years as well. I like that you pointed out just more and more leadership roles being owned by women of color, and now here today again, waiting for that final Supreme Court confirmation of Judge Jackson to be sat. And again, she will be taking the seat from Justice Breyer once he does he will be retiring here at the end of the term. Again, that vote 53 to 47. So we do have right now just a brief pause on the Senate floor. They will be making that announcement soon. And of course, all eyes have been watching this. We also heard reports that Ketanji Brown Jackson was watching this from the White House alongside with President Biden. Your thoughts on her being at the White House for this historic moment with the president who nominated her?
I can just imagine the energy in that room at the White House. I can imagine across the country, there's nearly not a dry eye for this monumental moment. I've tried to keep myself composed to do your interview, but it is a very touching moment. It brought chills down my spine to hear the yay votes, the majority, say yes for this black woman to be the nation's 116th justice. And so this is just a day that we will never forget. And we're so appreciative of President Biden for keeping his commitment to putting a qualified black woman on the United States Supreme Court. And so I'm sure there is a lot of energy and positive vibes at the White House now with the now justice sitting there with the president.
Yeah, a big success on their part when this officially does get confirmed. Again, right now, 53 votes does mean that she does have enough votes to be sat now on the high court. So it is going to be a historic moment here today, as we've been talking about. And I just want to touch back on just her upbringing, because she really did have a lot of role models in her life, which really helped lead her to where she is today.
Yes, a lot of positive role models. I believe she's spoken about Judge Constance Motley as the first federal judge to be a black woman.
No.
All right, and I know we got interrupted. We were waiting for that one final vote, but again, already has 53 yays, which means she will be confirmed. Let's go ahead, just listen into this for a moment. And I know we do have here on with us on Live Now from Fox, Carlos Moore, the president of the National Bar Association. We'll continue this conversation here with you in just a moment. But of course, we want to take you live out to the Senate floor, that in full for you here. As you can see, a lot of those senators continuing to celebrate with one another. We saw a lot of those hugs being given to each other. I do want to remind our viewers here with us, whenever it comes to breaking news, we are on top of it here for you on Live Now from Fox, always giving you the latest live looks and in full as well.
On this vote, the yeas are 53, the nays are 47, and this nomination is confirmed.
A lot of celebration here on Capitol Hill as we do have Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson confirmed for Supreme Court, a historic moment as she is now the first Black woman to be sat on the high court. A big historic moment. Let's continue listening in with Vice President Kamala Harris.
The President will immediately be notified of the Senate's action.
Madam President, very happily, I note the absence of a quorum.
And I'm sure President Biden has been notified, as we had been hearing some reports of Ketanji actually at the White House watching with President Biden. So Judge Jackson now officially being confirmed, and what a historic moment. We've been speaking about this moment with President of the National Bar Association, Carlos Moore, and I just want to ask you again, Carlos, what does this moment mean to all of those young people who have been watching here today, and what does it mean moving forward when it comes to these important historic moments for Black young men and women?
The vote that we just witnessed moments ago in the United States Senate means everything, especially to the 67,000 Black lawyers and judges and law students in this country that I have the privilege of representing. Dr. King said it best: the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Today we saw justice. After 233 years of having a Supreme Court, we finally have a woman, a Black woman, confirmed to serve on that court. Her color did not stop her. Her race did not stop her. This is a monumental day. It is something that was long overdue, and I am elated to see that it was done today.
I know so many people also saying the same things, but I just want to touch on, too, when we were going through the committee, we were listening in to 11 Republicans, 11 Democrats question Judge Jackson on a number of issues, on a number of pieces that she had previously either sentenced people on or been voting in certain ways or wrote opinions on. Do you think that some of those items that happened, some of the things that got brought up, especially from the Republican side, those Republicans who said maybe she was too soft on some of her sentencing for crimes, do you think that has anything that will change her philosophy moving forward?
I don't think it's going to change her philosophy at all. She was very deliberate in stating her methodology that she uses in every case that she decides. And so she comes from a place of impartiality. That's the first thing she does, is to make sure she's impartial. And then she follows the law. She follows the letter of the law with each decision. She has stated that she removes her personal beliefs, opinions, and follows the law. And she's not going to be an activist judge. According to her own testimony, she will follow the law and rule as the law requires. And so we could not ask for a better jurist. That's what judges do. They make decisions and from a place of impartiality.
And what happens from here? Now that she's been officially confirmed, we know Justice Breyer is going to be finishing out this term. What's the next steps for her?
The next major thing will be her swearing in as the 116th justice. I don't know if that would be immediate or would that take place maybe in June, towards the time that Justice Breyer does officially retire. But we're looking forward to that next momentous day towards her taking her rightful place on the United States Supreme Court.
Right. And as we've said, this is just such a huge moment. It's so exciting to see it happening and unfolding here before us. Any final thoughts that you wanted to make sure to bring up to our viewers watching here with us, this moment of the confirmation of Judge Jackson now being sat on Supreme Court?
We're just appreciative, especially not only of all the Democrats, but those two Republicans that had the courage of their convictions to cross party lines and support this lady for this historic occasion. And so Senator Romney, Senator Collins, and Senator Muskowski, they are to be commended. And so we are grateful, and we are just going to enjoy and bask in the moment for the rest of the day